My name is Selena Moreno, and I've just turned 33. For years, I'd been invisible in my own family, hidden in the shadows of my older sister, Brittany, who seemed to have it all. She was always the one that Dad couldn't get enough of. It wasn't always that way, though. Growing up in the small, dusty woodworking shop my father, Dominic Moreno, ran, I watched him craft beauty from raw wood. I loved it, absolutely loved it. There was a magic in the way he transformed rough timber into polished pieces of art, and as a child, I would often watch him work, fascinated by the way his hands moved with precision and care. I wanted to be like him. But my sister Brittany, she wasn't interested. She hated the smell of the wood, the sawdust, and would roll her eyes every time she saw me learning the craft. She went off to college in Boston, got a corporate job, and would avoid talking about Dad's workshop. To her, it was beneath her. But for me, the workshop was home. It was my place of refuge where I could be myself. I was the one who stayed, who learned from Dad. And despite everything I did, it was Brittany who got the spotlight. I was never good enough in Dad's eyes. I remember the first time I truly felt it, the moment I realized I would never be the one Dad would choose. I was 16, and I had made it to the state finals for my high school debate team. A huge deal for our small town. I worked so hard. I was bursting with pride. But when I told my parents, the response was lackluster. Mom was busy with work, and Dad promised he would be there, but he didn't show up. Instead, he was shopping with Brittany, preparing for her college interviews. I stood there, on that stage, hoping for his face in the crowd, but there was nothing. When I came home that night, the tension in the house was unbearable. Mom yelled at Dad, asking why he didn't keep his promise. But there was Brittany, walking in with shopping bags, completely oblivious. I was invisible. The years went on, and I kept fighting for Dad's approval, kept trying to prove that I was just as worthy of his attention as Brittany. But every time I tried, every time I achieved something, it was always Brittany who won. I poured everything into the business. I worked beside Dad, doing everything I could to help him grow it. But no matter how much success we had, no matter how much I did, it was always Brittany he would praise. And that, more than anything, made me feel like I didn't matter. It wasn't long before the business started to change. Dad's little shop began to grow. The work I'd put in, revamping the marketing, reaching out to new clients, and improving operations, paid off. Within just a few years, we were turning a profit. The company was growing rapidly, and I was at the heart of it, doing everything from overseeing designs to managing the day-to-day operations. I was proud of what I'd built. This wasn't just Dad's business anymore, it was mine too. I made it thrive. I pushed us to new heights, landing high-profile clients, securing contracts, and watching our reputation soar. But every success I had, every accomplishment, felt like a bitter pill. My father was still preoccupied with Brittany's life, her perfect future, her corporate job. He never really paid attention to what I had done for the business. When I looked back, I could never forget how, even in moments of triumph, I always felt like the backup plan. There were times I felt invisible, lost in the hustle of the business, never quite as important as my sister. Brittany, meanwhile, kept her distance. She never showed interest in learning about the business. She was too busy with her corporate life, too busy proving herself in the world of finance. She always had something to say when it came to money, but she wasn't involved in the hands-on work, the real effort that it took to keep the company going. Still, Dad always found a way to praise her. He never acknowledged that I was the one who kept things running, the one who made the business more than just a small-town woodworking shop. I often thought about how things could have been different if Dad had just seen me as more than an extension of his work. I was more than his tool in the shop. I wanted recognition. I deserved it. But the more I worked, the more I pushed, the more I realized that the recognition would never come from him. He always seemed to think that Brittany's career was the one that mattered. Even when I pushed the business from a humble shop to a multi-million-dollar operation, it still felt like I was fighting for a place at the table. Still, I worked harder. The success of the business felt like the only way I could prove to Dad, to Brittany, and to myself that I was worthy of more. I had everything on the line. Every single day, I woke up at the crack of dawn, drove into work, and did the grind. But no matter how successful I became, it was never enough. And then came the news that changed everything. It was the year that everything started to unravel. The cracks in the family foundation that I had tried so hard to ignore finally broke open. My parents, who had been the center of my world for as long as I could remember, filed for divorce. It wasn't a complete surprise, not after years of increasing tension, but it still hit me like a wrecking ball. My father's sudden, almost reckless behavior afterward, dating younger women who were clearly more interested in his money than him, only deepened the wound. I tried to keep my focus on the business, on what I had built. It was thriving, expanding at a pace I couldn't have dreamed of just a few years earlier. But with every piece of success, there was a sharp undercurrent of resentment, a quiet frustration gnawing at me that wouldn't go away. And then came Brittany's return. After several years in Manhattan, she moved back home, bringing with her her husband David and their 2 children. She was still the same as ever, distant, uninterested in the family business, but Dad seemed delighted to have her back. He quickly made her an equal partner in the business, even though she had zero experience in carpentry or design. It was as if her return was a sign of hope for him, a way to bring balance to the chaos in his life. Meanwhile, I was still the one holding everything together. I was the one running the business day to day, keeping our clients happy, managing employees, designing new projects, and handling the finances. It didn't matter. Brittany's presence was like a shadow that loomed over everything, a constant reminder that my role, no matter how crucial, would never be enough. That's when the real bombshell came. It was a family dinner, only the 3 of us, Dad, Brittany, and me. It was the first time in months that I'd been called to such a meeting, and I assumed it was about the business, about the future. What I didn't know was that my future was about to be completely erased. Dad cleared his throat and looked at both of us before dropping the bomb. "Selena," he began, his voice steady, almost clinical. "I've been thinking a lot about the future of the business, and I've decided that since you don't have a family of your own, it makes more sense to pass on the business to Brittany." I could feel the air leave my lungs. I felt lightheaded, as if I had been struck in the chest. "What?" I managed to whisper, unable to comprehend what he was saying. Dad's eyes avoided mine as he continued. "Brittany has a family to support, and she's in a better position to take the business forward. You'll still be part of it, of course, just in a smaller role. I've thought long and hard about this, and I think it's the best decision for everyone." I looked at Brittany. My older sister, the one who had never spent a day working in the business, who had laughed at me when I first started learning the trade, was now going to be handed the entire thing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. My life's work, everything I had built for over a decade, was going to be handed to someone who didn't care about it. It was like being ripped apart from the inside out. "Dad, you can't be serious," I said, my voice breaking. "I've given everything to this business. I've worked harder than anyone. How can you just give it all to her?" Brittany didn't even look up from her phone. She just shrugged, as if it was no big deal. Dad's voice was cold, final. "It's done, Selena. This is what's best for the future. You'll still have your position, but Brittany is going to run the business from here on out." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. I couldn't stay in that room. The betrayal, the sheer injustice of it, it was too much. The door slammed behind me as I walked out, leaving my father and sister sitting there, oblivious to the destruction they had caused. I felt like my world had collapsed. Everything I had worked for, everything I had given up, was now gone in a matter of seconds. I had been replaced, cast aside in favor of someone who hadn't earned it, someone who hadn't fought for the business the way I had. I couldn't even think straight on the drive home. The world around me felt like it was spinning, my heart hammering in my chest, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. My father had completely disregarded everything I'd worked for, every sacrifice, every late night in the shop, every marketing campaign I'd created. It was all for nothing. That night, I stayed in my apartment, pacing the floors, unable to sleep. I tried to reach out to my mom, but she didn't answer. I couldn't bring myself to talk to her about what had happened. Not yet. It was too raw. The anger I felt toward my father, toward Brittany, was overwhelming. And it wasn't just the business that was ripped from me. It was a lifetime of emotional neglect. I wasn't just losing my career. I was losing a father who had never truly seen me, never truly valued me. At some point, I fell asleep, but when I woke up the next morning, nothing had changed. The betrayal still cut as deeply as it had the night before. I couldn't go back to work for my father, knowing that the business would now be run by Brittany. I couldn't do it. It felt like the ultimate insult. I called my mom again, and this time she picked up. Mom, I said, my voice shaking. He gave the business to Brittany. I could hear the shock in her voice. What? He can't be serious. He is, I replied bitterly. He said she has a family to support, like I don't have a future, like all my hard work means nothing. I could hear her silence on the other end of the line. I knew she was processing it, probably trying to figure out how to soften the blow, but I didn't want to hear it. How could he do this, Mom? How could he just throw me away? She sighed softly. I'm sorry, Selena. I know how much this hurts, but maybe this is the universe telling you something. What do you mean? I asked, confused. You've built something incredible, honey. You've got skills. You've got a reputation. Maybe it's time to do something for yourself, for your future. Why don't you think about starting your own company? The words hit me like a spark. I'd never considered it before, not seriously. But in that moment, a fire ignited within me. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, and for the first time, I started to make a plan. I would build my own business. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I could do it. I had everything I needed: the skills, the clients, the passion. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. My father thought he could break me, but what he didn't realize was that he had just given me the push I needed to go out on my own. I made calls the next day, reached out to my old clients who trusted me, who had worked with me for years and knew my worth. They were shocked to hear what had happened, but many of them expressed their loyalty to me, promising they'd follow me if I started my own business. It was a risk, no doubt, but it was a risk I was willing to take. The first few weeks were a blur of activity. Starting a business from scratch is no small feat, but I was determined. I secured a small workshop space, a place that was mine, where I could build my own legacy. It wasn't as big as my father's shop, but it had potential. There was room to grow, to create, and to finally be free of the chains that had bound me to my father's world. I kept things small at first. I hired a few of the craftsmen who had worked for my dad and me, people who knew the value of good work and the importance of building lasting relationships with clients. Maria, Jake, and Lisa quickly became the backbone of my new company, bringing their expertise and loyalty with them. I couldn't help but smile when I looked around at my new space. This was mine. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was the boss. I was free to take my own risks, set my own direction, and build something that was entirely my own. And every piece of furniture we crafted, every project we completed, carried a piece of me in it. The clients started to pour in. Word of mouth spread quickly in the industry. The same clients who had once been loyal to my father came to me, not just because I was family, but because they respected the work I had done for them over the years. They knew that I wasn't just following in my father's footsteps. I was blazing my own trail. I was overwhelmed by the support. It felt like a new chapter in my life, one where I wasn't defined by my family's expectations or my father's favoritism. I was building my own reputation, and it was starting to pay off. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Starting a business is hard, and there were moments when I questioned my decision, moments when the weight of everything felt too heavy. But then I would remember the betrayal, the way my father had treated me, and I knew I couldn't give up. Not now, not after everything I had fought for. 1 month in, I landed my first big contract with a high-end hotel chain. It was a huge win, not just for the business, but for me personally. It was proof that I could succeed on my own, without my father's name or my sister's approval. The work we did for the hotel was some of the best we'd ever done. Innovative, beautiful, and functional. Clients started calling me for custom pieces. It was like I was finally getting the recognition I deserved. Still, even as I basked in the early successes, I couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal. I couldn't stop thinking about my father and Brittany and how they were dealing with the fallout from the decisions they had made. I wasn't happy that their business was struggling, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction I felt knowing that I had succeeded where they had failed. They had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. But despite everything, I never stopped wondering if I would ever get the chance to speak to my father again, to have that conversation that could give me closure. I didn't want to go back to the business. I was done with that chapter. But a part of me still wished he would realize his mistake, that he would come to me and ask for my help. A few months later, I got a text from Dad. My heart skipped a beat as I read the message. Selena, we need to talk. The business is struggling and I think we can work something out. Can you come over for dinner this weekend? I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing. part of me wanted to ignore it, to move forward and leave the past behind. But another part of me, still clinging to the hope that maybe he had learned something, wanted to see if he would finally take responsibility for his actions. I agreed to meet him. The night of the dinner, I drove to Dad's condo, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I knew this meeting wasn't going to be easy. I had no illusions that it would be some heartfelt apology or a resolution to all the pain I had endured. But a small part of me still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, my father had come to understand what he had done to me. When I arrived, the air in the condo felt heavy, thick with unresolved tension. Dad looked older than I remembered, worn down by the years of stress and bad decisions. And then there was Brittany, sitting at the table, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. She didn't even look up when I walked in. It was as if she was already preparing for the confrontation, the one she knew was inevitable. "Glad you came, Selena," Dad said, his voice strained, as if he was trying to sound casual. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened between us, and I want to find a way to move forward." I raised an eyebrow, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Move forward? After what you did? After giving everything I built to her?" I nodded toward Brittany, who still refused to meet my gaze. "I don't need your pity, Dad." "I'm not offering pity," Dad said, his voice becoming defensive. "The business is struggling. Without you, we've lost clients. People are demanding to work with you specifically. I don't want to see everything we built fall apart." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The same man who had ignored me for years, who had dismissed my worth, was now asking me to come back and save the business he'd given to my sister. "You think I don't know that?" I snapped. "I built that business from the ground up. I spent 10 years of my life making it what it was, and you handed it all to her like it was nothing. You think I'm going to walk back in and fix this mess after everything you've done?" Brittany finally spoke up, her voice dripping with entitlement. "You took our clients, Selena. You sabotaged everything. You don't get to play the victim here." I let out a bitter laugh. "I didn't take anything. Those clients chose me because I built the relationships, because I worked with them, because they trusted me. If you think you can just come in and take over, you're wrong." "Selena, please," Dad interrupted, his tone pleading now. "I'm offering you a chance to make things right. We can put this all behind us. Come back. Help us rebuild." My heart raced with frustration. This wasn't an offer to make things right. This was about saving his business, about protecting his legacy, and I was nothing more than a tool to him once again. "No," I said firmly, standing up from the table. "I'm done. I'm done with this family, and I'm done with this business." I walked toward the door, my body shaking with anger, but as I reached for the handle, I turned back. "You want to know why I'm done? Because you don't get to throw me away and then ask me to save you. I built my own business. I don't need you. I never needed you, and I'm not going to sacrifice my life for a company you've already destroyed." The silence in the room was suffocating. I could feel Brittany's eyes on me, but I didn't care anymore. I was done trying to win their approval, trying to fit into a family that had never valued me. I stepped out of that condo for the second time, and I knew it would be the last. I didn't look back. The months that followed were a whirlwind. I watched my business grow, my reputation as a craftsman and designer becoming stronger with every project we completed. We moved into a larger facility, hired more staff, and expanded our client base. The word spread. Selena's Custom Creations wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I'd built something new, something real. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't working for someone else's approval. I was working for myself. The phone call came months later, when things had finally settled into place. It was my mom. "Selena, I have some news," she said. "Your father, he sold the business to a big corporation." I felt a strange sense of relief. Not because I wanted to see my father fail, but because I knew that this chapter was finally over. The business he had once given to Brittany was gone. It wasn't his anymore, and neither was I. A few years later, my business was doing better than ever. We were designing furniture for high-end clients across the country, and I was featured in design magazines. My team and I had earned the respect we deserved, and I finally felt at peace with where I was. And then, there was David. He was everything I had been looking for. A partner, not just in business, but in life. We understood each other in ways that felt effortless. Our relationship was grounded in mutual respect and love, something I'd never had with my family. After 8 months of dating, I knew I was ready. I planned the proposal carefully, choosing a quiet evening when we were both at home. And when I asked him, I felt something shift inside me, a sense of completeness I had never known before. As I look back on everything that's happened, the betrayal, the loss, the rebuild, I realized that the greatest gift I could have received was the chance to stand up for myself. The greatest victory wasn't the success of the business or the recognition, it was the fact that I had learned to believe in my worth. No matter what my father or Brittany thought, I had built something real from nothing. That, in the end, was the real triumph.